Imagine sitting in a cold, windowless cell, knowing exactly when you'll take your last breath. No more appeals, no more delays, just counting down the days, the hours, the minutes, until the state decides it's time for you to die. Some of these men have spent decades on death row, waiting for the moment when the prison doors will open one last time, not for freedom, but for their final walk to the execution chamber. In 2025, 5 prisoners across the U.S. are set to be executed. Some committed their crimes as young men, others showed no remorse, and one of them is actively demanding his own death. What do they request for their last meal? What do they say in their final words? And how do they spend their last day on Earth? Let's uncover their stories, last wishes, and final moments, one by one. Brad Keith Sigmon has spent over 2 decades on death row, but in 2025, his time will finally run out. Convicted in 2001 for the brutal murders of his ex-girlfriend's parents, William and Gladys Lark, Sigmon's crime was fueled by rage and jealousy. After his relationship ended, he blamed the Larks for interfering, and in a fit of uncontrollable anger, he entered their home and beat them to death with a baseball bat. His ex-girlfriend, the intended target, managed to escape. The crime scene was horrific, leaving no doubt in the jury's mind that he deserved the harshest punishment. Unlike most death row inmates, Sigmon has chosen a method of execution that hasn't been used in the U.S. for over 15 years: the firing squad. South Carolina is one of the few states that offers this option, and Sigmon has willingly accepted it, making him one of the rare cases in modern history to die this way. His execution is set for March 7, 2025. While South Carolina still allows inmates to request a last meal, details of Sigmon's request remain unknown. He has also remained silent on his final words, leaving an eerie sense of mystery surrounding his last moments. David Leonard Wood, infamously known as the Desert Killer, terrorized El Paso, Texas in 1987. He was convicted for the brutal murders of at least 6 young women, their bodies discovered buried in shallow graves in the vast desert. The case shook the community, and the sheer depravity of the crimes left investigators convinced they were dealing with a serial predator. Despite overwhelming evidence linking him to the killings, Wood has never confessed, maintaining his innocence for more than 3 decades. His long legal battle has kept him alive, but in 2025, his time is finally up. For more than 30 years, Wood has occupied a cell on Texas's death row, watching countless other inmates take their final walk before him. But now, his execution is set for March 13, 2025, making him one of the longest-serving death row prisoners in Texas history. Since the state banned special last meal requests in 2011, Wood will receive the same standard prison meal as every other inmate that day. His final words remain unknown, but given his unwavering claims of innocence, it is possible that he will use his last breath to once again deny his crimes before the execution drugs take effect. As the execution date looms, the families of his victims prepare for the closure they have awaited for decades. Many have long advocated for justice, believing that only Wood's execution will truly bring an end to their nightmare. Meanwhile, death penalty opponents argue that his case raises troubling questions about wrongful convictions and the flaws in the justice system. Despite numerous appeals and last-minute efforts to delay his fate, the courts have upheld the verdict. On March 13, 2025, barring any last-minute intervention, David Leonard Wood will take his final breath, bringing an end to a chapter of horror that has haunted El Paso for nearly 4 decades. Aaron Brian Gunches is not like most inmates on death row. While others have spent decades filing appeals, desperately trying to delay their fate, Gunches has done the opposite. He has been actively demanding his own execution. Convicted for the 2002 murder of Ted Price in Arizona, Gunches kidnapped his victim, drove him into the desert, and shot him multiple times. He later pleaded guilty, fully accepting responsibility for the crime. Unlike many death row inmates who maintain their innocence, he has never denied what he did. For years, Gunches has grown impatient with the slow-moving justice system. He has repeatedly written to the Arizona Supreme Court, urging them to carry out his sentence as soon as possible. His case has been riddled with delays, but in 2025, he is finally set to get what he asked for. His execution is scheduled for March 19, 2025 in Arizona, and unless something drastic happens, there will be no more waiting. While his last meal request has not been publicly disclosed, it would not be surprising if he refused one altogether. He has also given no indication of what he plans to say in his final moments, leading many to believe that he may die in complete silence. Matthew Lee Johnson committed one of the most horrifying crimes imaginable. In 2012, during a robbery in Brownwood, Texas, he set 79-year-old store clerk Mary Catherine Burke on fire, leaving her to burn alive in one of the most brutal deaths ever recorded in the state. Surveillance footage captured Johnson calmly walking away as flames engulfed the store, showing no urgency, no regret, no fear. When questioned, he showed no remorse, and a jury wasted no time handing him the ultimate punishment: death. For the past 12 years, Johnson has sat in a Texas death row cell, filing multiple appeals, all of which have failed. His execution is now scheduled for May 20, 2025, in the infamous Huntsville Unit's death chamber, where hundreds before him have met their end. Because Texas abolished special last meal requests in 2011, he will eat whatever the prison serves that day, likely a simple tray of meatloaf, vegetables, and cornbread. Prison insiders say Johnson has been writing a final statement, but what he plans to say remains uncertain. Whether he will express remorse or go out with defiance is unknown, but either way, his final moment is approaching fast. Wendell Arden Grissom has spent nearly 2 decades on death row, but his execution date is now set in stone. Convicted for the 2005 murder of Amber Matthews during a robbery in E., Grissom showed no hesitation when he pulled the trigger. After shooting Matthews, he also wounded another woman, Drew Kopf, who barely survived the attack. Witnesses and investigators described his actions as cold and calculated, and during his trial, he showed no remorse for what he had done. Instead, he smirked as the jury found him guilty of capital murder, and when the judge sentenced him to death, he remained expressionless, as if he had already accepted his fate. Since his conviction in 2008, Grissom has spent years filing appeals, but one by one, they were denied. His last chance at clemency was rejected, and now his execution is scheduled for March 20th, 2025. Oklahoma still allows inmates to request a last meal, but it must cost $25 or less and be available locally. There is no public record of what Grissom has chosen. His final words remain a mystery, but prison officials say he has never spoken of regret, leading many to believe that he will die without ever apologizing for his crimes. And just like that, their time runs out. Some fought for appeals, others accepted their fate, but in the end, there's no escaping the execution chamber. Their last meals, their final words, their final moments, all leading to one unavoidable ending. Justice or revenge? That's for you to decide. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more real-life cases. In the United States, executions are rare, but even rarer when the condemned is a woman. In March 2025, 5 women will face the death penalty, each convicted of crimes that shocked the nation. Some have spent decades behind bars, fighting for appeals. Others have accepted their fate. But before they take their last breath, they will make 2 final choices: their last meal and their final words. Some will express regret, some will maintain their innocence, and some will leave the world in silence. These are the final moments of 5 women set to be executed in 2025. On a tragic night in May 1999, a brutal crime shocked the quiet community of Dothan, Alabama. Patricia Blackmon, a 29-year-old woman, was arrested for the murder of her adopted daughter, 28-month-old Dominiqua Bryant. The crime scene was horrifying. Dominiqua's tiny body was covered in bruises, her skull was fractured, and she had multiple broken bones, evidence of severe abuse over time. The most chilling detail? A shoe print imprinted on her chest, suggesting she had been stomped on with force. Blackmon initially claimed the injuries were accidental, saying Dominiqua had fallen from a bed, but medical experts confirmed the injuries were inflicted intentionally and were far too severe to be caused by a simple fall. The jury took only 30 minutes to convict Blackmon of capital murder. She was sentenced to death, becoming one of the few women on Alabama's death row. As her execution date nears in March 2025, Blackmon has remained silent. Details of her last meal request and final words have not been disclosed. Will she express regret, claim innocence, or refuse to speak in her final moments? The countdown to her final breath has begun. In the heart of Alabama, a harrowing case unfolded that left a community in shock. Tierra Capri Gobble, a young mother, was convicted of the brutal murder of her 4-month-old son, Phoenix Jordan Parrish. On December 15, 2004, emergency responders arrived to find Phoenix unresponsive, bearing signs of severe abuse. The infant's injuries were extensive: a fractured skull, broken ribs, fractured wrists, and multiple bruises covering his tiny body. A particularly disturbing injury, a tear inside his mouth, suggested that a bottle had been forcefully shoved, causing significant trauma. Prior to this tragic event, Gobble's children had been removed from her custody by Florida's Department of Children and Families due to concerns of abuse and neglect. Despite court orders prohibiting contact, Gobble moved in with her uncle, Edgar Parrish, who had taken custody of Phoenix. This blatant violation of court directives set the stage for the ensuing tragedy. During the trial, the prosecution presented compelling evidence of Gobble's abusive behavior, highlighting the severity and frequency of Phoenix's injuries. The defense, however, painted a picture of Gobble's troubled past, citing a childhood marred by abuse and neglect, which they argued contributed to her actions. Despite these claims, the jury found Gobble guilty of capital murder. In September 2005, they recommended the death penalty by a vote of 10-2, a decision that was subsequently upheld by the court. As her execution date approaches in March 2025, details regarding Gobble's final meal request and last words remain undisclosed. The silence surrounding her impending execution leaves many to ponder the complexities of her life and the tragic end of her son, Phoenix. Will she express remorse, maintain her innocence, or choose to remain silent in her final moments? Only time will reveal the final chapter of Tierra Capri Gobble's story. In the serene suburbs of Orange County, California, a tale of betrayal and murder unfolded that would lead Tanya Jamie Nelson to death row. In April 2005, Nelson, a North Carolina resident, sought guidance from Ha Jade Smith, a well-known fortune teller, regarding her business endeavors. Smith advised Nelson to relocate her business to North Carolina, a move that ultimately led to financial ruin for Nelson. Believing Smith responsible for her misfortunes, Nelson harbored a deep-seated grudge. Driven by vengeance and financial desperation, Nelson orchestrated a plan to murder Smith and her daughter, Anita Vo. She enlisted the help of Philip Zamora, luring him with promises of introducing him to potential romantic partners. Together, they traveled to California under the guise of visiting Smith for a consultation. Once inside Smith's home, the duo launched a brutal attack. Nelson stabbed Vo multiple times, while Zamora assaulted Smith with a wine bottle before stabbing her to death. They then ransacked the house, stealing jewelry, credit cards, and cash, attempting to disguise the murders as a robbery gone wrong. The investigation quickly led authorities to Nelson and Zamora. Evidence included stolen credit cards used by Nelson and a scheduled appointment with Smith on the day of the murders. Zamora, in exchange for a reduced sentence, testified against Nelson, detailing the premeditated nature of the crimes. In 2010, Nelson was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, with special circumstances of committing multiple murders for financial gain, and was sentenced to death. As her execution date approaches in March 2025, details regarding Nelson's final meal request and last words remain undisclosed. Will she express remorse for her actions, maintain her stance of seeking retribution, or choose silence in her final moments? The culmination of her journey from betrayal to the execution chamber leaves many pondering the depths of human vengeance and the consequences it yields. In the heart of Mobile, Alabama, a harrowing tale of child abuse and murder unfolded, leading Heather Lavelle Keaton to become the first woman sentenced to death in Mobile County. In 2010, the partial skeletal remains of 4-year-old Natalie DeBlaze and her 3-year-old brother, Chase DeBlaze, were discovered in secluded wooded areas across Alabama and Mississippi. Investigations revealed a chilling pattern of abuse. Natalie was allegedly poisoned with antifreeze, bound with duct tape, and confined in a suitcase for extended periods. Similarly, Chase endured severe mistreatment, including being taped, gagged, and forced to stand in a corner overnight, leading to their tragic deaths. Leavelle Keaton, the children's stepmother, was implicated alongside their father, John DeBlaze, in these heinous acts. The couple's relationship began in 2008, and by 2009, they were living together with the children. Witnesses recounted instances of Leavelle Keaton's abusive behavior, including binding the children with duct tape as a form of punishment. In May 2015, Leavelle Keaton stood trial and was convicted of capital murder for Chase's death and reckless manslaughter for Natalie's. The jury recommended the death penalty, a sentence upheld despite multiple appeals. In June 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case, solidifying her fate on death row. As her execution date in March 2025 approaches, details regarding Leavelle Keaton's final meal request and last words remain undisclosed. The tragic deaths of Natalie and Chase serve as a somber reminder of the profound consequences of unchecked abuse within a household. In the early hours of August 16, 2008, a devastating fire engulfed the home of Christy Michelle Scott in Russellville, Alabama. While Scott and her younger son escaped unharmed, her 6-year-old son Mason tragically perished in the blaze. Mason, diagnosed with autism, was found in his bedroom, the victim of smoke inhalation and thermal burns. Investigations soon revealed unsettling details. Just hours before the fire, Scott had secured a $100,000 life insurance policy on Mason, adding to existing policies totaling $175,000. Further scrutiny uncovered a history of suspicious fires linked to Scott, including incidents at her father's and grandmother's residences. During her trial in June 2009, prosecutors argued that Scott orchestrated the fire to claim the insurance money. The jury found her guilty on 3 counts of capital murder: murder of a child under 14, murder during arson, and murder for pecuniary gain. Although the jury recommended life imprisonment without parole, Judge Terry Dempsey overrode this, citing the heinous nature of the crime, and sentenced Scott to death on August 5, 2009. As her execution date approaches in March 2025, details regarding Scott's final meal request and last words remain undisclosed. The community remains divided, grappling with the complexities of a mother condemned for the death of her own child. 5 women, 5 crimes, 5 executions. Some denied guilt, some showed no remorse, some remained silent, but all faced the same fate. Their last words and final meals, small choices before an irreversible end. Was justice served, or were some condemned beyond redemption? The death penalty is final, but the debate surrounding it, that will never die. The world outside moves on, unaware. But inside the walls of America's execution chambers, time stops. The final meal is served, the IVs are prepped, and the condemned take their last walk. Some whisper apologies, some die in silence. Others go out with chilling defiance. But no matter their words, their fate is unchanging. In 2025, these prisoners met their final moment. What did they eat? What were their last words? And did any of them face death without fear? Tonight, we uncover the last meals, final statements, and the chilling endings of those already executed this year. Nico Jenkins. Nico Jenkins' execution in Nebraska ended a case that horrified the nation. In 2013, just days after being released from prison, he embarked on a 10-day killing spree, brutally murdering 4 people in Omaha. His victims, Juan Uribe Pena, Jorge Cajiga Ruiz, Curtis Bradford, and Andrea Kruger, were all shot execution style. Jenkins later claimed he was acting on orders from an Egyptian serpent god, igniting debates over his mental competency. On January 12, 2025, after years of legal battles, Jenkins took his final walk to the execution chamber. For his last meal, he requested steak, fried shrimp, and a large Pepsi. As he lay strapped to the gurney, the warden asked if he had any final words. Jenkins apologized to the victims' families, blaming his crimes on untreated mental illness. At 6:05 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. Within minutes, his body went still. At 6:12 p.m., Nico Jenkins was pronounced dead, his violent legacy finally coming to an end. Ronnie O'Neal III. Ronnie O'Neal III met his fate in Florida on February 20th, 2025, after being convicted of one of the most brutal family murders in recent history. In 2018, he shot and beat his girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, before stabbing their 9-year-old daughter, Ron Nevaeh, to death and setting her body on fire. He then turned on his 8-year-old son, stabbing him repeatedly, but the boy miraculously survived and later testified against his own father in court. His trial became infamous after he chose to represent himself, delivering wild, erratic outbursts, even screaming at the jury while cross-examining his own son. Despite his bizarre defense, the jury found him guilty and sentenced him to death. On execution day, O'Neal requested a vegetarian pizza and water for his last meal. When asked for final words, he maintained his innocence, insisting he was wrongfully convicted. At 6:10 p.m., the lethal injection took effect. His voice faded, his breathing slowed, and within minutes, Ronnie O'Neal III was gone, his legacy of violence finally ending in silence. Chris McNabb. Chris McNabb's execution in Georgia on March 15, 2025, marked the final chapter of a case so disturbing it shook the entire nation. In 2017, McNabb and his girlfriend, Courtney Bell, reported their 15-day-old daughter, Kalaya McNabb, missing. Hours later, her tiny, battered body was found hidden in the woods, stuffed into a drawstring bag. Investigators determined that McNabb had brutally beaten her to death, inflicting skull fractures so severe they were described as equivalent to a car crash. During his trial, McNabb lashed out in court, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. The jury took little time to convict him, sentencing him to death for the horrific crime. On his final day, McNabb refused a special last meal, eating the standard prison food instead. When asked for final words, he expressed remorse, saying he wished he could take back his actions. At 6:00 p.m., the lethal injection began. His body tensed, his breathing slowed, and by 6:08 p.m., Chris McNabb was pronounced dead, his violent story finally coming to an end. Martez Abram. Martez Abram was executed in Mississippi on April 10, 2025, bringing an end to a workplace massacre that left 2 people dead and many others traumatized. In 2019, Abram, a former Walmart employee, was suspended from his job. Days later, he returned with a gun, stormed into the store, and opened fire on his co-workers, killing Anthony Brown and Brandon Gales. Security footage captured employees and customers scrambling for their lives as Abram continued shooting, injuring a police officer before being taken down. During his trial, prosecutors described Abram as a man seeking revenge, showing no remorse for the victims. He was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in 2022. On execution day, Abram requested fried catfish, coleslaw, and sweet tea for his last meal. When asked for final words, he remained silent, never apologizing. At 6:15 p.m., the execution drugs took effect, his breathing slowed, and within minutes, Martez Abram was gone forever. Wade Wilson. Wade Wilson was executed in Florida on May 5, 2025 for the 2019 murders of Diane Ruiz and Christine Melton, two brutal killings that left Cape Coral shaken. Wilson, a repeat offender with a violent past, lured both women to their deaths, strangling and beating them before dumping their bodies in separate locations. During his interrogation, he boasted about the murders, showing zero remorse, even laughing as he described the killings in chilling detail. His trial painted him as a sadistic predator, and the jury had no hesitation in sentencing him to death. He spent 6 years on death row, filing multiple failed appeals. On execution day, Wilson requested a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake for his last meal. When asked for final words, he apologized to the victims' families but never explained why he committed such horrific crimes. At 6:10 p.m., the lethal injection took effect, and within minutes, Wade Wilson was gone forever. Austin Myers. Austin Myers was executed in Ohio on July 22, 2025, for the 2014 murder of 18-year-old Justin Back. Myers and an accomplice broke into Back's home, strangled him, and stabbed him repeatedly in a failed robbery attempt. Despite never physically wielding the knife, Myers was sentenced to death as the mastermind behind the crime. On his final day, he requested pepperoni pizza and a 6-pack of root beer for his last meal. When asked for final words, he apologized to Back's family, acknowledging the pain he had caused. At 6:08 p.m., the execution drugs took effect, and Myers was gone. 5 men, 5 executions, stories of violence, desperation, and final moments that couldn't be undone. Some silent, some full of regret, but none could escape fate. Last meals, final words, one cold reality. Justice or vengeance, you decide. No matter how hard they fought, the execution chamber always wins. Did justice prevail, or was it just another cycle of violence? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more real-life crime stories. Death row is a place of waiting. Some wait for mercy, others wait for justice, but for these 6 women, the waiting is over. Their crimes were shocking. Their trials were relentless. Now, as execution looms, only 2 choices remain: their final meal and their last words. Will they beg for forgiveness? Will they go in silence? Or will their final moments be just as chilling as their crimes? This is the last chapter of 6 women sentenced to die in February 2025. And this is how it ends. Christy Michelle Scott. In the early hours of August 16, 2008, a devastating fire engulfed the Russellville, Alabama, home of Christy Michelle Scott. While she and her younger son escaped unharmed, her 6-year-old son Mason tragically perished in the blaze. Investigators soon uncovered unsettling details. Just 12 hours before the fire, Scott had secured a $100,000 life insurance policy on Mason, adding to existing policies totaling $175,000. Further scrutiny revealed a history of suspicious fires linked to Scott, including incidents at her father's and grandmother's homes. Notably, in 2005, her own house caught fire twice in 1 week, though arson was never confirmed. During her trial in June 2009, prosecutors argued that Scott had intentionally started the fire to claim the insurance money. Despite her protests of innocence, the jury found her guilty on 3 counts of capital murder: one for the murder of a child under 14, another for murder during arson, and a third for murder for pecuniary gain. The jury recommended life imprisonment without parole. However, on August 5, 2009, Judge Terry Dempsey overrode this recommendation, citing the heinous nature of the crime, and sentenced Scott to death by lethal injection. Wendy Andriano. In the early hours of October 8, 2000, a distress call was placed from a modest apartment in Phoenix, Arizona. Wendy Andriano reported her husband, Joe Andriano, gravely ill and unresponsive. Joe, battling terminal cancer, had been under Wendy's care. However, the scene responders encountered told a story not of natural decline, but of unimaginable betrayal. Evidence revealed that Wendy had administered sodium azide, a lethal chemical, in an attempt to poison Joe. When this failed, she resorted to bludgeoning him with a bar stool and inflicting a fatal stab wound. The brutality of the act, coupled with Joe's weakened state, painted a grim picture of premeditation and cruelty. In 2004, she was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. As her execution date approached in February 2025, Wendy maintained her innocence, expressing remorse for her husband's death, but denying culpability. For her last meal, she requested a vegetarian pizza, a side salad with Italian dressing, and a slice of cheesecake. In her final statement, she said, "I am deeply sorry for the pain caused. I did not kill my husband." Her execution was carried out by lethal injection. Shauna Fordy. In May 2009, the quiet community of Arivaca, Arizona, was shattered by a brutal home invasion orchestrated by Shauna Ford, a self-proclaimed leader of the Minutemen American Defense, an anti-immigration vigilante group. Ford, seeking funds for her organization's Border Patrol activities, targeted the home of Raul Jr. Flores, believing he possessed drugs and money. Under the guise of law enforcement, Ford and her accomplices forced their way into the Flores residence during the early hours. The intrusion escalated into violence, resulting in the tragic deaths of Raul Flores, aged 29, and his 9-year-old daughter, Brisenia Flores. Brisenia was shot as she pleaded for her life, a chilling testament to the brutality of the crime. The case drew national attention, highlighting the dangers associated with extremist anti-immigration groups. In 2011, Ford was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. As her execution date approached in February 2025, Ford maintained her innocence, portraying herself as a political prisoner. For her last meal, she requested a cheeseburger with fries, a chocolate milkshake, and a side of jalapenos. In her final statement, she declared, "I am innocent of these crimes. History will judge the true criminals." Her execution was carried out by lethal injection. Michelle Lynn Michaud. In the late 1990s, Michelle Lynn Michaud and her partner, James Anthony DeVeggio, embarked on a series of heinous crimes across California. Their modus operandi involved abducting young women using a specially equipped van designed for assault. This crime spree culminated in the December 1997 kidnapping and murder of 22-year-old Vanessa Leigh Sampson, a college student from Pleasanton. Sampson was forcibly taken into their van, where she endured unimaginable torture, including sexual assault with curling irons, before being strangled to death. For her last meal, she requested fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, and a chocolate milkshake. In her final statement, she expressed, "I am sorry for the pain caused, but was led astray." Her execution was carried out by lethal injection. Heather Levell Keaton. In the heart of Mobile, Alabama, a harrowing tale of child abuse and murder unfolded, leading Heather Levell Keaton to become the first woman sentenced to death in Mobile County. In 2010, the partial skeletal remains of 4-year-old Natalie DeBlaze and her 3-year-old brother, Chase DeBlaze, were discovered in secluded wooded areas across Alabama and Mississippi. Investigations revealed a chilling pattern of abuse. Natalie was allegedly poisoned with antifreeze, bound with duct tape, and confined in a suitcase for extended periods. Similarly, Chase endured severe mistreatment, including being taped, gagged, and forced to stand in a corner overnight, leading to their tragic deaths. Leavelle Keaton, the children's stepmother, was implicated alongside their father, John DeBlaze, in these heinous acts. The couple's relationship began in 2008, and by 2009 they were living together with the children. Witnesses recounted instances of Leavelle Keaton's abusive behavior, including binding the children with duct tape as a form of punishment. In May 2015, Leavelle Keaton stood trial and was convicted of capital murder for Chase's death and reckless manslaughter for Natalie's. The jury recommended the death penalty, a sentence upheld despite multiple appeals. In June 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review her case, solidifying her fate on death row. As her execution date in February 2025 approaches, details regarding Leavelle Keaton's final meal request and last words remain undisclosed. The tragic deaths of Natalie and Chase serve as a somber reminder of the profound consequences of unchecked abuse within a household. Kathy Lynn Serenana. On December 25, 2005, the festive atmosphere of Corona, California, concealed a harrowing tragedy within the Serenana household. Kathy Lynn Serenana and her husband, Raul Ricardo Serenana, had taken in their nephews, Conrad Morales, 13, and Ricky Morales, 11, from Fresno, seeking a fresh start. However, this new beginning devolved into a nightmare of relentless abuse and neglect. The investigation unearthed a pattern of severe physical abuse inflicted upon both boys. Tragically, Conrad's body was later found in a storage unit in Texas, revealing the extent of the cruelty they endured. In June 2009, Kathy Serenana was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death for her role in Ricky's death. Raul Serenana received a death sentence for Conrad's murder. As her execution date in February 2025 approaches, details regarding Kathy's final meal request and last words remain undisclosed. The tragic fate of Conrad and Ricky Morales serves as a somber reminder of the vulnerability of children and the profound betrayal they suffered at the hands of those entrusted with their care. 6 women, 6 final moments. Some begged for mercy, some went to their deaths in silence, others held on to their defiance until the very end. Their crimes were brutal, their punishments irreversible, but in their last hours, they were no longer killers or convicts, just humans facing the inevitable. Their last meals, their final words, the final choices before a fate that no appeal could change. Justice or cruelty, redemption or retribution. The executions are over, but the debate on the death penalty, that will never die. Time. It's the one constant in our lives, yet for some, its end is predetermined. In 2024, the United States carried out 25 executions across 9 states, marking a significant year in the realm of capital punishment. Each of these individuals faced their final moments with unique reflections, last words, and chosen meals, offering a poignant glimpse into the human psyche when confronted with mortality. What thoughts occupy one's mind in those final hours? What meal does one choose, knowing it's the last? And what do their final words reveal about their journey, remorse, or defiance? Join us as we delve into the stories of those executed in 2024, exploring their crimes, their final moments, and the echoes they left behind. Let's begin with Kenneth Eugene Smith, whose execution marked a historical moment in the United States. On January 25, 2024, Alabama executed Kenneth Eugene Smith, making him the first person in the United States to be executed by nitrogen hypoxia, a method never before used. Smith was convicted for the 1988 murder for hire of Elizabeth Dorleen Sennett, a pastor's wife. The crime was orchestrated by her husband, who sought to claim insurance money. Smith and another man were each paid $1,000 to carry out the killing. After a failed lethal injection attempt in 2022, Alabama authorized nitrogen hypoxia as an alternative execution method. This method induces death by replacing oxygen with nitrogen, leading to asphyxiation. The decision to use this untested method sparked debates and concerns about its humaneness and potential suffering. On the day of his execution, Smith was served his last meal 8 hours prior: a T-bone steak, hash browns, toast, and eggs with A1 sauce. This timing aimed to minimize risks during the nitrogen hypoxia process. His final words were, "Tonight, Alabama causes humanity to take a step backwards. Thank you for supporting me. Love all of you." Witnesses reported that Smith appeared to convulse and breathe heavily for several minutes before becoming still. The execution raised questions about the efficacy and ethics of nitrogen hypoxia, with some describing the process as experimental. Smith's case underscores the complexities and controversies surrounding capital punishment methods in the modern era. Next, we turn our attention to Ivan Cantu, whose execution reignited discussions about the death penalty and potential miscarriages of justice. Ivan Cantu was executed on February 28, 2024 in Texas for the 2000 murders of his cousin James Mosqueda and Amy Kitchen. Prosecutors argued that Cantu committed the murders to steal money and drugs. Throughout his time on death row, Cantu maintained his innocence, alleging misconduct during his trial and highlighting new evidence that could exonerate him. Despite these claims, his appeals were exhausted, and the execution proceeded as scheduled. Details of his last meal and final words were not publicly disclosed, leaving a shroud of mystery over his final moments. Cantu's case drew attention from various advocacy groups who questioned the integrity of his conviction and the broader implications of potential wrongful executions. Now, let's explore the case of Willie James Pye, whose execution marked Georgia's resumption of capital punishment after a hiatus. On March 20, 2024, Georgia carried out its first execution since 2019, putting to death Willie James Pye. Pye was convicted for the 1993 murder of his ex-girlfriend, Laverne Yarbrough. The crime occurred during a heated argument, leading to Yarbrough's fatal shooting. Pye's execution followed a 4-year hiatus on executions in Georgia, primarily due to the COVID-19 pandemic and ongoing debates about the death penalty. His case reignited discussions about the morality and efficacy of capital punishment. For his last meal, Pye requested 2 chicken sandwiches, 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, 2 bags of plain potato chips, and 2 lemon-lime sodas. He accepted a final prayer but chose not to make a final statement. Pye's execution was met with mixed reactions, with some viewing it as justice served, while others saw it as a step backward in the pursuit of more humane forms of punishment. Next, we turn our attention to Michael DeWayne Smith, whose execution in 2024 reignited discussions on the death penalty in Mississippi. On April 4, 2024, the state of Oklahoma executed Michael DeWayne Smith, marking a significant moment in the state's capital punishment history. Smith was convicted for the 2002 murders of Janet Moore and Sharath Babu Puluru in Oklahoma County. Moore, 41, was fatally shot in her apartment as she prepared for work at the OU Medical Center. Puluru, a 22-year-old college student, was working as a convenience store clerk when Smith shot him and set his body on fire. During his interrogation, Smith confessed to the murders. However, he later claimed his confession was made under the influence of drugs and maintained his innocence during his clemency hearing in March 2024. Despite his assertions, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted 4-1 against recommending clemency. In the hours leading up to his execution, Smith declined the option of a special last meal, choosing instead to receive the standard prison fare. When offered the opportunity to make a final statement, he nonchalantly replied, "Nah, I'm good." The execution proceeded without any reported complications, and Smith was pronounced dead at 10:20 a.m. Witnesses noted that after declining to speak, he briefly conversed with his spiritual advisor before the lethal injection was administered. Smith's case underscores the complexities of the justice system, highlighting issues of confession validity, drug influence, and the profound weight of final moments on death row. Next, we turn our attention to Brian Dorsey. On April 9, 2024, the state of Missouri carried out the execution of Brian Dorsey, marking its first execution of the year. Dorsey was convicted for the 2006 murders of his cousin Sarah Bonney and her husband, Benjamin Bonney, in their New Bloomfield home. The couple's 4-year-old daughter was present during the crime, but remained unharmed. In the years leading up to his execution, Dorsey garnered unprecedented support for clemency. Over 70 current and former Missouri correctional officers who had interacted with Dorsey during his incarceration advocated for his sentence to be commuted to life without parole. They described him as a model inmate who had shown genuine remorse and rehabilitation. Additionally, a former Missouri Supreme Court judge, multiple jurors from his trial, state legislators, and some family members of the victims also supported clemency. Despite these appeals, Governor Mike Parson denied the clemency request, and the execution proceeded as scheduled. On his final day, Dorsey was served his last meal at 11 a.m., which included 2 bacon double cheeseburgers, 2 orders of chicken strips, 2 large orders of seasoned fries, and a pizza with sausage, pepperoni, onion, mushrooms, and extra cheese. In a handwritten note left as his final words, Dorsey expressed profound remorse. "To all of the family and loved ones I share with Sarah, and to all of the surviving family and loved ones of Ben, I am truly, deeply, and overwhelmingly sorry. Words cannot hold the just weight of my guilt and shame. I still love you. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I am sorry I hurt them and you." He also thanked those who supported him, stating, "To my family, friends, and all of those that tried to prevent this, I love you. I am grateful for you. I have peace in my heart in large part because of you, and I thank you." Dorsey further conveyed that he harbored no ill will or anger towards anyone involved in the execution process. The execution was carried out at the state prison in Bonne Terre, with Dorsey pronounced dead by lethal injection at 6:11 p.m. His case has sparked ongoing debates about the death penalty, the potential for inmate rehabilitation, and the complexities surrounding clemency decisions. In 2024, these executions weren't just legal sentences. They were moments that revealed the rawest parts of human nature. Some met their fate with remorse, others with defiance. Their last words, their final meals, were the final echoes of lives forever marked by crime and punishment. But as the death penalty continues, so do the debates. Justice or cruelty? Closure or more pain? That answer, well, it's up to us to decide.